A warm welcome back to Decouple. Today I'm joined by returning guest Noah Rettberg, Decouple's official German correspondent, in a rather somber week. This is the week of the final closure of the remaining German nuclear plants. And so I thought I would check in with Noah, both for his personal reaction and to get a sense of the reaction within broader German society, to talk about the state of the Energiewende, the enthusiasm for the Energiewende in Germany, and to reflect a little bit upon what was lost, and maybe we'll end with a little bit of hope and opportunity for the future. So Noah, welcome back.
Hi, as always, an honor and a pleasure.
We're gonna have to start paying you soon.
No, I'm doing like honorary work. My anger and frustration fuels me.
All right. Well, thank you for letting us exploit you in this way. So Noah, I think everyone who listens to this podcast is very aware of what just happened. But give us a quick summary, and then tell us about the demonstration you were at, and let's dig into, I guess, probably the changing sentiments around nuclear energy in Germany.
Saturday last week, the three remaining Baulinie 80 reactors that Germany was still operating, which had been given 3-month-long life extension by the German government to make it through this winter, were shut down, probably as planned for the final time in their operational lifespan. They basically ran almost until midnight, and then we had Emsland shut down around 10 o'clock, and ISR2 shut down around 11 p.m., and then we had Neckar-Westheim finally go offline right before midnight strike on Saturday. And that was, as so many German media creator, German green or left-wing politician is so regurgitating right now, basically how big this is, this big moment, the official end of the nuclear age. It's a bit bizarre, because it's like you have to live in this completely Germanocentric bubble to see it as this. But they see it as the end of the nuclear age, of like an evil age when greed or whatnot tried to abuse those forces not meant to be used by humans of the nuclear force to make energy, that these times are now over. And yeah, so they really enjoyed these moments. They were celebrating. They were firing on all cylinders right before the shutdown, the last week when the reactors were still running. We were bombarded with articles, with posts, with those people getting anxious for the upcoming closure. And when it happened, they celebrated, and they really celebrated. They prided themselves on this. I think Mark Nelson, when he was furious about basically the closure of Indian Point and the Sierra Club, he described the Sierra Club dancing on the grave of Indian Point. And they are dancing on the grave of the entire German nuclear industry, which once was the best nuclear industry there is, and I will stand to this point. It felt like it went beyond dancing on the grave of one of these industrial cathedrals. It just is it's the middle finger to tens of thousands of people who made amazing work building and running and now decommissioning these plants, who set benchmarks for the nuclear industries through the 80s, through the 90s, through the 2000s on how to operate reactors. It's a middle finger to people who made the ISA reactor in Bavaria, the world's most productive reactor 10 times. It's a middle finger to the people who made Runde, the world's most productive reactor 10 times. I'm sorry. I just can't. I got the honor to visit one of these amazing pieces of technology just before it closed, while it was still running, standing right next to the steam generators as they were vibrating and shaking and giving off lots of heat. I stood next to the spent fuel pools and walked inside the containment building, and it was amazing, and it just makes one even more angry and even more lost for words on what we are doing right now if you see these plans inside, because no one will probably ever see an industrial site this well maintained, run to this high of standards, and this clean, and also this safe. We were in the reactor building. You can be that in a German reactor inside the containment while the thing is going at full, or in our case, due to the stretch out, 70% power. We were in there almost 2 hours. I got less than the microsievert of dose. Like if I spent the same time in a plane, I probably got 5 times the amount of dose. It was like
that was inside containment.
Yes, we were standing inside the containment and we were chatting. We were having a great time. We were there with friends, with people from the plant. It just gave me a whole new appreciation. It makes one even more angry and even more it makes one even more depressed on what was happening. And probably this day to I don't know, a few weeks ago when I was at the plant, probably one of the best days of the year, and it made the last weekend one of the worst weekends of my life. Even though we had a great protest in Berlin, but it was just like when we drove home from the process and from the little party in quotation marks afterwards, and when I drove home with the friends, and that was when we knew because we knew had the dates, Later Westheim had shut down. And we drove through Berlin. He just looked at me and said, "I can't believe it. They actually did it. Later Westheim is gone."
It's it's an extraordinary triumph from the Green Movement. Germany was 25% nuclear powered.
30% at around 2000.
To have accomplished this rather ignoble goal, even with an energy crisis striking Europe, it took an incredible amount of forbearance to fight physics in that way, and to quote unquote accomplish this. I mean, when I visited Indian Point, my mental image was that of a kind of like an environmentalist trophy hunter, standing on the corpse of an endangered species, something that provided incredible value to the world. It's truly this act of vandalism and I don't know, cruelty. But let's not dwell on that too long. We've heard your kind of personal reaction. I do want to talk a bit more maybe later on about again what was so unique about German nuclear power. That started being in containment for a couple hours and getting such a low dose. There's some interesting, for the tech nerds in the audience, some interesting reasons for that.
The dose, getting a low dose, isn't as big a deal as just being able to get inside.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll talk about why.
We'll
leave that as a teaser.
You can do that in a CANDU, but you can't do that in an American or French or Russian reactor.
Well, we'll leave that as a teaser for later. So you mentioned sort of the Greens celebrating. What was the broader reaction? It seems like there's been a real shift or at least loosening of the hatred of nuclear energy in Germany. Tell me a bit more about, what the sort of reaction's been in terms of general polling and in terms of, the mainstream media response.
So at this point, basically, we have a mixed response. There are, at this point, both journalists and most Germans very well aware that this decision probably wasn't one of the wisest decisions made by German politics made until this day. I think there are many Germans right now, I would give it probably around a third, which rightfully see this decision and this closure as one of the most stupidest decision. I think we had like one German professor which called it basically the stupidest decision in like the history of Germany, citing that what we did during World War II was not stupid, it was evil, but this is just stupid and it is tremendously stupid and destructive. So there are people in Germany aware of this, and probably we have a solid majority at this point which does not support the nuclear phase out anymore. But here's the thing: in politics, it doesn't just matter how many people support or oppose something. If there are many people supporting something and they don't voice that vocally, they don't say, if you are against what I support, I will not vote for your party. But there are many people who say, I oppose this thing and I will make my vote partially dependent on which party will oppose the thing that I oppose as well. So, of course, those people have a lot more influence. And as of now, while most Germans were against the closure, they didn't give enough of a fuck to swing German public opinion. And you can see this in the Liberal Party, which is part of the coalition government right now, which publicly states how terrible they think that the phase out is, but they have voted against a bill put into the parliament by the Conservative Party, which planned to extend the operational lifetime of these plans. So I want to say it like this. Maybe it sounds a bit too dramatic, but the Liberal Party in Germany has the blood of these plans on its hands, even though it publicly stated that it wanted these plans to continue operating. Don't give if you hear something about them wanting to keep running these plans or bring them back or whatever, it isn't something that they deem worth it on the larger scale. Basically, keeping the coalition and getting as much concessions as they can get from the other coalition partners is way more important, and they will not act on this, and they will not support nuclear if it costs them anything right now, because they know that right now this isn't something that will punish them at the next elections. They will be punished for a lot of things, probably at the next election, but they will not. They don't feel that they are punished for the nuclear phase out. So right now, this is probably the state of mind of most Germans. We are against it, but we are not so far against it that we would really do a lot of it about. And this makes the Greens at this point very comfortably sure that what they see as the final end of the atomic age is actually the final end of the atomic age.
Right, right. Do you think it's fair to say that the mild winter that Europe and Germany experienced really was kind of the death toll of German nuclear? If it had been a cold winter, if there had been a real shock, if gas prices had remained high, that the plants would have been extended further, or is that too optimistic?
We had a mostly warm winter, but we had 4 weeks in late November and early December, which were cold, where we saw snow, where we saw temperatures below 10 degrees zero, where we saw natural gas consumption rise rapidly. So if the winter had been not this warm, energy consumption would have been much higher, and natural gas consumption would have been much higher, and would have put a lot of pressure on the German grid, which without natural gas-fired power plants is not able to reliably supply the grid with electricity. Coal alone doesn't do it anymore. So they need the gas plants running, and if they had to prioritize home heating to a stronger degree, then this could have put the gas plants in a situation where they might not have been able to supply enough electricity, and this would probably have swayed some opinions maybe not in the heads of the politicians, but more likely in the heads of the people working underneath them. Those officials, which Martin Nelson sometimes describes as ruthlessly efficient. I would disagree with this on some parts, but there are certainly a significant amount of ruthlessly efficient people in Germany left, trying to keep the ship floating. And it's the ruthlessly efficient people that will pursue the German energy policy, that will try to find at all cost the fossil fuels to make up for what our official energy policy is lacking. Those people are not the people in charge. Those people are executing the plans of the people in charge. And it probably might have swayed them to pressure the people in charge to maybe do something about the nuclear power plants, but that didn't happen. And German politics and German institutions are, as of now, very certain that, or they think they are very certain that they can pull the NRD vendor off, and are very confident in this. And this wouldn't have been the case if we had a cold winter, because they right now delude themselves and they delude their supporters. I mean, the Green Party, to a degree, also the Social Democrats, that basically it was smart German government policy that got us through this winter, but it wasn't. There was a lot of sacrifice on part of the German public. There were a lot of expensive last-ditch measures at trying to save energy by the German public. Of course, not by everyone, but by a significant amount of them. There was reduced production. There was the ruthlessly efficient procurement of fossil fuels, including basically buying an already built floating LNG terminal and pretending that you did an engineering masterpiece by installing a pre-made LNG terminal, which they really celebrated this as a thing that now we can move fast because we have changed and we are so good. No, you didn't. You bought an already existing piece of infrastructure, moved it to Germany, moored it on site, and loaded some LNG from it. So now we got an LNG terminal, but not because we were good at building something, but we bought something that already existed. So there is this facade of competent government policy around the NRD politics that was put up, and that a significant amount of Germans, especially those who are more on the left side of the political spectrum right now, believe in. And this facade could not have been kept up if we had a colder winter. No amount of ruthlessly buying South African coal would have changed this if we had a colder winter. So yes, the Green Plan to fight climate change was saved itself by the climate change that they plan to fight.
No, just to sort of step back for a second, you mentioned nuclear was 30% of the German grid. Were any of those plants, were the closures all political? Were any of those plants end of life or beyond life extension or refurbishment? And has there been a cost estimate for what this cost, essentially the unnecessary shutdown of 1/3 of Germany's grid?
I'm not aware of any cost estimate that I'm confident in. I can give you this. These plants once made 170 terawatt hours of electricity, which they don't make right now. And we are right now making a similar amount of coal-fired electricity. The thing is that if these plants would exist right now, all of them, including the tiny Obretheim plant we had in 2000, all of these plants would probably be able to run right now and would probably be able to run economical right now. If all these plants would exist, it wouldn't mean that all coal-fired electricity production in Germany would have ceased. But it would have greatly diminished it. And it would probably also have shifted coal use from this medium load, partially base load use to extreme load shift, load following, and PT news, which probably you might have seen a lot of coal plants converted to gas plants, which has happened at a coal plant in Austria, but did not yet in Germany, but might have happened. And if these plants had continued to exist, I would safely bet on that Germany right now would have at least 100 megatons of CO2 emissions less. So there is a cost to emitting CO2 because we are certificate trading inside the EU. These certificates are trading in the double digits of euros. Their price is of course volatile, but we would be saving billions of euros from certificates alone if those power plants would be running rather than coal plants. Then there goes all German nuclear was always cheaper than German coal. So these power plants, if they would run, the electricity that they would produce is cheaper than the coal electricity. So for every megawatt hours, that Germany would produce from nuclear, of course, they would save a couple to probably 10 euros per megawatt hour. And then there is also an economic upside of just not being as energy starved as we are. We would not be in this situation where right now Germany is losing its last silicon producing plant. So metallurgical silicon for chip manufacturing. The last plant that was doing this in Bavaria and Germany is right now closing. Will be closing down soon. And rising electricity and rising energy cost is the reason why this is happening. So no, I'm sorry, I can't give you a firm number on this. But what I can tell you is definitely that with all these plants running, we would be saving millions of euros a year alone on CO2 certificates. We would be not millions, billions. We would probably be saving billions of euros per year on electricity cost, and we would not have missed those opportunities, and we would not have the cost of German industry having to shut down and decrease production that we
And
are.
how premature were the closures of these last three plants? How many years did they have left in them? I know that's a matter of some debate with the Mark Nelson type saying nuclear plants are functionally immortal, but let's say they have a 60 to 80 year lifespan.
At least 20. So the one in the worst shape is Neckar-Westheim. I mean, it's not in a bad shape. The thing is, the steam generator at these nuclear power plants, when they find out that steam generator tubing is compromised, they plug off the individual tubes in these steam generators. The steam generators have like 4,000 tubes. So if you plug like 20 of these tubes inside one steam generator, this isn't like a big deal for the power plant as a whole. But you can't do that indefinitely. So in around 15 to 20 years, the steam generators at Neckar-Westheim would have been in a state where they would have needed to be replaced, which was never done at a German nuclear power plant. And this would have maybe be some reason for other nuclear power plants, like replacing steam generators is routine, but this was never done in a German nuclear power plant. And this gave Neckar-Westheim, which was a Gen 3 reactor, one of the best performing, best maintained, and most advanced reactors in the world, was decried wrongfully by German Greens as a rust reactor, as like an old shitty piece of thing that will explode or blow up or lead any second because they just plugged some of the tubing inside the steam generators, which is a routine maintenance operation in these plants. And this is just a complete travesty in my mind that having been in a Baulinie 80 reactor, that this phenomenal piece of engineering in this state where everything inside is perfectly painted, or either perfectly painted or from stainless steel, so there is nothing in there that will rust rust. Sorry, nothing in there is rusting or could even have the chance to rust inside these plants. And because of this formality of closing off some tubing that you don't have perfect confidence anymore that these plants have been decried as like rust reactors or seen or described as almost falling apart by German green and anti-nuclear groups. So at least 20 years, I would be probably more certain that with the exception of Neckar-Westheim, all these reactors, including Grund and Brockdorf, which closed last year, could have run 40 years, probably without having the need of steam generators replaced. And Neckar-Westheim probably needing new steam generators in 10 to 20 years, probably getting them earlier so that this isn't no longer be a case. But these plans could have retired long after me, who has just started his career. So I'm not Mark Nelson. I'm not saying that they are eternal, but the American plans, which are not as good as these plans are, even though they are adequate, they are getting 80 years, and some may get 100 years. And if the American plants can get this, then of course any KWU built nuclear power plant that Germany ever had could get 80 years in total. And none of these plants, no West German nuclear power, and I don't think these German as well, none of them ever got to the 40 years, which Greens pretend like is the intended lifespan, even though it isn't for these plants. So they all died in their 30s.
So Noah, again, I promised a little comic relief. If there were great steelman arguments, or if there's some that I'm missing, I'd love to hear them. But again, on the comic relief side, what are some of the most ridiculous things you've seen? I think one I saw was essentially, well, there's only 3 reactors left. That was only a trivial amount of power. We did some quick calculations. I saw Mark did some, around 10 million German households worth of electricity, or the entire output of the Nigerian grid, which serves 200 million people, just kind of wantonly shut off. I remember, when the Indian Point plant closed, just thinking about what that would look like if it was removing, essentially it was the same as removing every single solar panel and wind turbine from New York, in the course of the 10, 20 minutes it took to shut down the reactor. It's a pretty extraordinary thing. But beyond that, do you have any, maybe it's dark humor here now to ask you to come up with this, but what are the most ridiculous things you've heard from the German Greens on this topic?
So on the side of the downplaying thing is basically these reactors have been running in 2023 around 70-80% of their power because they were in deep stretch out for 3 months of the year. So if you put the electricity that they produced over the last 3 months and compare that to what is going to be probably the entire electricity production and consumption of electricity in Germany, then you can say, oh, these power plants were just like 1% of German electricity in 2023. They will just be 1% of German electricity in 2023, so they are irrelevant. But of course, this takes into consideration that they were running only for 3 months of the entire year, and in those 3 months, it significantly reduced power. So this has been something that is really infuriating in the downplaying of the role of these nuclear power plants, which, if they had full fuel and would run at full capacity, would make 6 to 7% of German electricity, and they pretended it was only like 1%. This is, I think, really really significant. One of the most dastardly lie that German Greens and German anti-nukes have come up with is the lie that German nuclear power plants, or nuclear plants in general, so they say, clog the grids because they claim these plants they can basically just run at full power. They are not flexible, so they clog our grid for our beautiful renewables. So they need to go. And basically, as soon as they are no longer clogging the grid, they will no longer clog the grid, and all the renewables will take over and instantly replace them because we don't need nuclear, it's just clogging the grid up. Even though the nuclear power plants went went on Saturday and on Sunday. You could see like basically we lost at this point 2.5 because due to deep stretch out. 2.5 gigawatt was their last power level of all of the units combined, and it was almost instantly replaced with 2.5 gigawatts of coal. But they claim that for some reason German nuclear power plants are inflexible and clog up the grid, even though that these nuclear power plants that we have in Germany are among the nuclear power plants with the best load following capabilities everywhere in the world. They are doing primary and secondary control. They can, if, for example, a large generator goes off the grid, German nuclear reactor could increase or decrease its output by 100 megawatt, so almost 8% of the reactor inside 30 seconds to compensate for immediate load spikes or flat speed due to a large consumer going online or like a large generator going offline. So these nuclear power plants ran primary control of the grid. They had tremendous load following capacities as such. In the last years, those reactors put on the electricity market their capability to throttle up and down with 20 to 30 megawatts per minute of secondary, so intended control. They probably could, if they were forced to, do even more, probably up to 100 megawatt per minute in secondary control if needed. So these are power plants with load following capacity exceeding the load following capacity of coal plants. They do so more reliably. They load follow more reliably than coal plants. German coal plants have a tendency to trip and break off if they do too excessive load following, which puts a further burden on the grid, as the power plants that we will see ourselves more reliant in the future for our load following on firm capacity can't load follow that reliably as the nuclear plants did. Some of them once used to be like Neckar-Westheim 1 or Isar 1. They did basically in the 2000s, they were used more as peaker plants than they were used as baseload plants. They went from 40 to 100% on a daily cycle. There's this load diagram of Neckar-Westheim 1 in 2009, where every day in the morning it goes up to 100% power and then throttles down in the evening and then goes back to 100% power in the next day. So these are tremendously fast load following power plants. And German Greens had the audacity to claim that these power plants were in fact not needed, but just clogging up the grid so our beautiful and shiny renewables can't get onto the grid. Even though it is the renewables that fail when we need them and they clog up the grid when we don't need them.
Tell me a little bit about the kind of coal complacency, because, there was a number of German, I think, hard coal plants that were restarted to fill in for expensive gas. Several lignite plants were extended. Even our beloved Greta Thunberg piped in and said that, nuclear plants in Germany shouldn't be shut down since they already exist. Certainly, not while we're burning coal, or not to focus on more coal burning. Is that weighing heavily on the conscience of Germans or climate-concerned Germans or Greens, this pivot back to coal?
Oh no, the coal plants are just a fallacy. They are just a folly. They are clogging up the grid. Don't worry about them. We don't need them. It will be totally fine when they go back offline in 2024. No, but the thing is, in 2022, in the summer of 2022, the German government put 7 gigawatts from 14 units of coal power plants back into the grid, mostly bituminous coal, but also 1 or 2 units firing lignite coal. They went back online in October of 2022, and they will only stay online for 2 years. So they will go offline again in 2024. The thing is with these plants of course, as of now, are compensating for the loss of total 8.2 gigawatts of nuclear that we lost in 2021 and now in 2023. And these coal power plants right now, they are keeping the grid online. So please don't claim that Germany is in danger of immediate blackout right now, or immediate electricity scarcity to the point that it would be dangerous. And the reason why that isn't the case are, to a large extent, the coal generators that we took back online in 2022. German politics basically accepted increased CO2 emissions from these coal plants as a consequence of this. But these coal plants are just on the grid until 2024. And then they are supposed to go online. And the largely green government that we have will need to find a way to basically sell it to their base, keeping these plants online for longer, because they are indispensable right now. We cannot afford to take these coal power plants back offline at these 7 gigawatts for in total 37 gigawatt coal fleet. We can't afford to take these coal power plants back offline. And we can't afford to take the other coal power plants that would also are supposed to go offline this decade right now. So
is it fair to say? Is it fair to say that Germany substituted coal for nuclear, 1-to-1?
Nuclear for coal, to a large degree, yes. Mostly, yes. Of course, it also substituted it with gas, and then substituted it with renewables to a degree. But the firm and load following capacity of those nuclear power plants is gone. So firm load following power plants will need to take their place, and this is coal. Even though that nominally we basically lost 170 terawatt hours per year of generation from nuclear and built 170 terawatt hours of generation from wind and solar. So nominally we replaced clean nuclear with less clean wind and solar, but on a basis of meeting the load, meeting the demand, we replaced nuclear with coal, and we replaced it with gas. And we definitely did it with these last 6 reactors. We replaced them with coal, and we will run into really big problems if these coal power plants will be taken offline in 2024. And we will run into really big problems if they will not be. Because, as I said, these coal power plants are not as reliable as our nuclear power plants were. And these coal power plants are under-maintained, understaffed, and are rapidly aging. This isn't a way to run a power plant by basically giving it 2-year life extensions every 2 years, which is essentially what German politics see at this point is no other way of doing, because we can't sell long-term continued operation of coal to the public, because one half will get really angry on you because, oh, we are losing our climate targets, and the other part will get really angry towards you because if we don't need those nuclear plants, why are you now forcing us to keep the coal plants? So you are admitting that the nuclear plants were needed. So if they keep these coal plants, people will get angry at them. And if they don't keep these coal plants, Germany can no longer meet grid demand and will face blackouts. Not now, not that nuclear plants have gone, but it will face them in the future as we have increasing demand on the grid from an ever larger amount of heat pumps and electric vehicles that the government is also forcing onto the grid, which will be met with an insufficient amount of firm power on the grid. German government right now plans to build 20 gigawatt of H2-ready gas plants, basically gas plants. But you cannot replace 8 gigawatts of nuclear, almost 40 gigawatts of coal, with 20 gigawatts of gas, in a scenario where you are drastically increasing electricity demand and even more drastically, disproportionately increasing peak consumption of electricity when it gets cold and when people in the night want to charge their car. So they are in a dreadful position that I would not want to be in. And right now they are celebrating, but they will choke on their laughter in a couple of years when they will be forced in the situation where they need to decide what they are doing with these coal plants. They will be forced to keep coal plants online that nobody at this point wants to see online, that will not be properly maintained, that are aging, that are deteriorating, and that no longer have their full workforce at site. So, yeah, right now they are celebrating, but the laughter will fall silent soon, and I don't want to be in their situation. And I can't tell you what will happen back then. Back then in the future. It's a bit of a singularity event. I think, especially the warm winter, told us to be humble about what we predict. But if there is one thing that one can predict, it is that shit will hit the fan in the future. This isn't a way to reliably run anything if you don't do preventative and regular maintenance. The availability of any industry, any plant will deteriorate. The plant will deteriorate, and this will happen to German coal power plants, which are an inadequate replacement of German nuclear power plants solely from a grid management perspective.
You're talking about this H2 ready gas plants, hydrogen ready gas plants, and we've covered Greenpeace Energy's pro wind vegan gas plus. So maybe this is a great synergy here. There were up to a less than 1% blend of green hydrogen into the natural gas they were providing. Again, this was a Greenpeace entity. Tell me a little bit about your thoughts on that, on I guess the hydrogen greenwashing that you're seeing. How diluted or how easily diluted is the German public about these probably 30 new gas plants that are going to be built, these 3 new LNG terminals. I guess there's one long-term contract for gas with Qatar now, 15 years.
But it's a tiny contract.
Yeah.
So you cannot do long-term fossil fuel anything in Germany right now. The German government has banned the installation of gas or oil, anything fired home heating effective 2024. So we are in a situation right now where German craftsmen are basically working overtime to install as many gas and oil furnaces in homes as they can before the year ends. So you can't do fossil fuel long-term anything in Germany. It's no longer politically allowed, basically. But it is effective. But physical reality enforces us to do short-term fossil fuel burning and investments. And in this situation, building gas plants, pretending that they are hydrogen plants, is the only way of getting fossil-fired anything onto the grid that is new and intended for long-term operation. That isn't just riding out the old crap until it breaks down, but is actually building new fossil-fired equipment in Germany, basically will be done due to pretending that they are burning hydrogen, which they will never be. They will never do that. They will be they might do pro-wind Sweden Canadian hydrogen gas with homeopathic amounts of Canadian hydrogen, which is a great irony because German Greens did not only force us to subsidize their bullshit renewables, it also basically forces German the Greens are great supporters of homeopathic medicine. So we have German public health care pays for homeopathic medicine. So my sister recently got her wisdom tooth out. She had to pay herself for the narcotics, so the anesthetics. Sorry, she had to pay for the anesthetics because German public health does not cover the anesthetics. But you can get your expensive homeopathic bullshit paid for by German public healthcare, and you are allowed to do your natural gas with homeopathic amounts of Canadian hydrogen in Germany, because you can't build you are not really in a situation where you can build gas-fired anything. So you need to pretend that there is hydrogen in it, and this is a bit irony, because there are the ultra climate radicals, which are honestly opposing anything except like wind and solar. So they are opposing the hydrogen stuff. Then there are like the light green renewable bros pretending that this hydrogen thing is really real and will save us. And then you have on the more conservative side, you have people who will support this hydrogen thing, basically because they also know it will get some fossil fired stuff on the grid that we desperately need, and it's just pathetic. And it will never meet up for what we are losing in coal and nuclear generation, and it will never be able to adequately supply us in the future, where we are supposed to have 50 million electric cars and 9 million heat pumps on the grid in 2030. So it's just pathetic and sad.
Yeah, I've said it many times, but the kind of climate and electrification commitments that governments are setting are analogous to a brick wall to which we are rapidly speeding towards and stepping on the accelerator, not the brake. It's going to be quite a reckoning.
It doesn't get into my mind that basically the Liberal Party managed to slightly put the brakes on the EU internal combustion engine ban for passenger cars, for passenger vehicles, but it actually went along with banning new installment of gas-fired home heating effective next year. We are not allowed to install gas-fired heating in homes effective next year or face a 50,000 euro fine. So your choice: pay the 50,000 euro heat pump, pay the ridiculously expensive electricity, and are not sure if you can actually heat your home in a cold snap, or pay 50,000 euros for the gas fine, or hope that you can get it installed this year. If you said when we had like the election period in 2021, and you said, and if the conservative had said, oh, but if you don't vote for us, then you won't be able to have like your home heated in the future, then probably German media would have decried that. Oh, the conservatives are spreading fake news. Of course, niemand hat die Absicht, eine Mauer zu bauen. Nobody intends to ban gas stoves effective next year. But they did that, and the liberals just went along with it. Maybe it's like how like communists think, like radical communists, basically thinking the worse the situation it gets, the more open people are for our radical ideas. So the liberals has just stopped pretending that they can ease the worst effects of a largely green government. And so they are just going along, hoping the worse it gets. The hard times made hard men will make soft times. But yeah, we are on the rapid trajectory of hard times in the future. We have been spared the hard times this winter. We might be spared the hard times next winter, but we won't be in the winters after that.
Right. No, I mean, it seems like this generation not only is kind of cruising on the infrastructure that their ancestors built, but actively desecrating it, vandalizing it, shutting it down. It's pretty extraordinary. It's kind of like being out on the walking the plank and sawing off the plank, or being on a tree branch and sawing off your own tree branch. It's pretty extraordinary. No, I think we'll we'll have to leave it there. I'll give you a kind of last right to comment here before we sign off, because I know you've always got one last thing to say. So go ahead, out with it, and then we'll shut her down for today.
As of now, Germany has 5 nuclear power plants, 5 pressurized water reactors, which have fuel elements on site, which could be reshuffled into a new core on which they can run for like half a year. And these plants can be made ready to run again in half a year. Even though that maybe right-wing populist media has told you that 2 of these reactors are totaled by the evil Greens, no, all 5 of these reactors are still able to run and could be turned back around in around half a year. That is the stand as of the 21st of April 2023. These plants could all be online next year. But this will not be the case for much longer. One nuclear power plant will soon have holes drilled into its reactor core in a couple of weeks, so then it will be gone. Another one soon afterwards. One of the Neckar-Westheim, which got shut down last Saturday, already has decommissioning license. So at the end of this year, there will probably be just one reactor that could be turned back around rapidly, which is ESA. And after that, all we could do with these plans is essentially reinstalling a new reactor pressure vessel, something that has never been done before in one of these reactors. But if there is any reactor where that could have been the case, it is a German reactor, and we could prove Mark Nelson right that these reactors are truly eternal. But the chance of saving these reactors without attempting to do what has never been done before, many of them will be zero very soon, and for ESA will be zero next year. And barring any external event, there is nothing we can do about this. I really, in the last couple of months, tried to be as optimistic as I could be. And we certainly tried to, I don't know, find avenues, talk to politicians, advocate, have protests. We did a pretty amazing protest on Saturday. It was a great protest. Huge thanks to the 2 guys. If they are listening to this, you 2 guys, you know who you are, and we all stand on your shoulders for organizing this protest and for doing it. But this doesn't change the political situation. Germany is in political gridlock regarding nuclear. German coalition will probably stand until the next election in 2025. At this point, at the next federal elections, all of these reactors will be in a state where they cannot be turned around without installing new reactor pressure vessels, without doing what has never been done before. So the chance of saving the JER-6, something that we spent the last years fighting for, as of now, is probably zero. The chance of bringing them back online as zombie reactors with no reactor pressure vessels might exist. There is no way Germany will get around having to get back into nuclear in the future. Rebuilding those plants probably is cheaper than building a new EPR. So that probably might be something we will be looking in the future, but it's also unlikely until damage to the building is done. But as of now, barring I don't know, Putin invades Estonia or something, nothing will save the world's greatest nuclear power plants. And not German nuclear forever, but this German nuclear, which once led the technology, is actually dead. And it's mortifying. It's something that we will have to live with. And I wish the best for my fellow nude bros in the world around. The fate of German nuclear, not this German nuclear, but German nuclear in general, will be in your hands. The harder you turn towards nuclear, the sooner Germany will get to Wiedereinstieg, to re-entering nuclear technology. Nothing has shaken the trust of Germans into the nuclear phase out more than all those countries around us turning towards nuclear. And so more countries, more Western countries, more European, more firmly democratic countries turning towards nuclear, building new nuclear, extending old nuclear, and making rapid progress on building new nuclear will change the situation in Germany. So if you have some affinity for German nuclear, due to probably me, I don't know, lamenting about it for the 7th time in a year, if you want to do us here in Germany a favor, do yourself a favor and fight for nuclear in your countries and fight for rapid renuclearization in your countries. And if I get the chance, might come to you and I will like to protest with you, because the fate of Germany lies in the hands of its neighbors.
All right, Noah. We'll leave it there. Thanks again for coming on the podcast. I'm sure it won't be long till we chat again, but my condolences, my friend. I know this has been hard for you.
Yeah, it has not been a nice Sunday.
All the best.